Hi, grade 5 teachers. Welcome back. We are going to be taking a look into operations with decimals again. We're going to be looking at kind of our second big chunk, which is multiplication of decimals. So we're going to be looking at essential tasks 56, 57, 58, and 59. Just something that I wanted to point out that has been added to our scope and sequence. There are some extra practice slides here. You'll notice there's some that are just problem solving with mixed operations. And then we have some specific to each of the operations. So definitely check that out. We know that our students are going to be kind of all over the map when it comes to decimals. So if you need some extra practice or some extra things for students to do, definitely utilize those. Once again, we have those 3-act tasks that students can utilize as well. And you'll notice that a lot of them involve multiplication and division with decimals. So a lot of these have videos kind of already embedded. So hopefully this video will be a little bit brief. Let's dive in. We're looking at Essential Task 56. Essential Task 56 has been taken from Blackboard, Theme 3, Unit 10, Question 6. So some of you may remember this from before. But really what students are doing is they're picking a number. If it's better or easier or whatever, you can assign them a number and they can just write what their number is. And they are using either these place value discs in the slide, the place value discs in this Didax app, or they can tilt their screen down and use their place value discs that they have. And they're multiplying their number that they've chosen by these multiples of 10. And I'm just going to delete this box so we can kind of see the whole problem. So these are all going to be by these powers of 10. And we're going to notice and talk about how that we are going to have equal groups, right? So I have, and sorry, my computer is being really wonky. So thank you for your patience in advance. So if I'm multiplying my number by 10,000, my number's 3, I'm going to have 3 groups of 10,000. If I'm multiplying my number by 1,000, I'm going to have 3 groups of 1,000, right? So we're really focusing on that multiplication. We're really focusing on what that model looks like, groups of. Because we're going to go from here and we're going to start to look at, well, what happens when I'm multiplying a multiple of 10 that's less than 1 whole. What are those models going to look like? And I'm sorry, here we see that you could use place value discs, place value blocks if you would prefer to use those over the discs. Once again, we're then going to go in, have that share and connect, have that powerful conversation of groups of, we're talking groups of, that's multiplication, right? We have equal groups of what's happening when we multiply these numbers. What's the rule? What's the pattern? Be careful of that overgeneralization of just adding zeros. That's not mathematically correct, right? We all know that. So now we're going down here to decimals. So if I multiply my number by 1/10, now I have 3 groups of 1/10, right? How is that similar to when I was multiplying with whole numbers? How is that different? And we can build, once again, you can build with these discs on the slide. You can build with that Didax app. You can tilt your camera down, whatever works for you and your kiddos. The following slide will also have place value blocks if you would prefer that. Whatever works. Once again, though, so I'm going to be showing these different groups. So kind of keep in mind in the back of your head that they are going to be building a lot of groups. These are editable. So if you need to change the amount of groups, specifically for the whole numbers, if you don't want to start with 10,000, you can totally start with 100. You can definitely edit any of these. So our takeaway here from Essential Task 56 is equal groups of, right? And that's how we can really show that multiplication. We'll start to see, if I can scroll down, we'll start to see that we started here with just those whole numbers, right? Times that power of 10. Well, what happens when I'm not talking about that power or that multiple of 10? So for example, slide 9, when it comes up, I have 5 times 3/10. So what does that mean? What does that look like? I have 5 groups of 3/10. How can I show that? How can I build that? And we're really connecting our understanding of what we know about multiplication is not different when I'm thinking about our decimals, right? It's going to be those same strategies as when I was thinking about multiplying with whole numbers. So here's that 5 times 3/10, right? So 5 groups of 3/10 or 5 rows of 3/10 is going to be the same as 15/10 or 1 5/10. So another great way to have a conversation kind of surrounding that. You'll notice there's a bunch of practice problems kind of built in. You might notice that there's a little more practice problems in these lessons than there are in some of our other lessons. And that's solely because sometimes with especially these topics, kids need a little bit more practice. And sometimes that practice is a little harder to find. So that is essential task 56. From here, we're going to be looking at essential task 57. And 57 is we're really going to be making that connection between multiplication with an area model with fractions and multiplication with an area model with decimals. So how are they similar? How are they different? So for this first try it out, you'll notice this also comes from Blackboard, Unit 10. Question 8, so they're really going to be thinking about what are two fractions when multiplied together will give me 24 hundredths. You'll see this little note down here at the bottom. Students might need a little help or a little nudge or a little hint that they're choosing denominators of 100 because, or excuse me, of 10, because obviously they could do other denominators, but that's not going to work on this grid of 100. So they can either use that shading here on this grid, or they could use their grids, their printable grids that they got in their printable math materials. Or they could use that Ready Common Core area model link here as well. Whatever works. The idea here is that we want to get them to make that connection between that area model for fractions and that area model for decimals. So now I have 24 hundredths again. How can I use that knowledge that we already have, and how can I apply that to this decimal multiplication understanding? There is a video here, so I'm not going to go into this much more. Please check out that video to understand this a little bit more. But once again, we're making that connection here. We're making the connection between that area model and that area here that these both overlap. Actually, looking at this one reminds me, you will notice that there is another Ready Common Core app. This one is for multiplication with decimals in an area model. A lot of great feedback on multiplication of fractions in the area model. I highly recommend you check that out. There are some slides here that are going to introduce this app to your students and to you. It's kind of like a step-by-step. How does it work? What does it look like? I highly recommend checking that out. I think it's going to be a great resource, just like that fraction one was for our kiddos. Okay, I know this is going really quickly and I apologize. Let's dive into 58. 58, we're going to kind of start to see all of our strategies come together and kind of have students pick what's going to work best for them. Here's an array. It did get a little bit more aggressive. There's a video right here that kind of step-by-step takes you through how to solve that with students. You'll also notice on option 2, same idea as before. If I have 4 groups of 65 cents or 4 groups of 65 hundredths, what does that look like, right? How could I build that with my blocks? How could I build that with my, I'm sorry, these are discs. How could I build that with my discs? How could I build that with my blocks? You'll notice the problem is also in the math app. So they can build an array that way as well. And this one says it is in the context of money. Money is added here. The money app is linked. You'll notice though there's only dimes and pennies. If you want to add more coins, please feel free. The reason why I purposefully chose dimes and pennies is when we're thinking about making the connection between our strategies, I really wanted to focus on place values. So thinking that dimes is really the tenths place value and pennies really representing that hundredth. This is really going to help us make those connections. Students can also use or create an area model. I understand that they may not have exposure to this yet, so you might want to wait. You'll notice here that share and make a connection. we're suggesting that you take one of those strategies that your students are doing really successfully or really well, and relating it to that area model. So what's similar, what's the same? Area model and partial products are really going to be our end goal when we're thinking multiplication with decimals. So how can we make those connections? There's another problem here that they can practice. Once again, there's multiple options for what they could use. I wanted to come down here to our listen and learn. This is actually the second problem, the second trade out, all the different ways that you could solve it using the materials provided. Actually, that's not true. It's not all the different ways. I don't have money here. But thinking we could make that array, we could make that area model, and here's that place value disk, that representation with those equal rows, right? We have 3 groups or 3 rows of 2 and 7500ths here. Okay, last but not least, we have essential task 59. Essential task 59, we're still multiplying with decimals. You'll notice, so now we have a digit in that ones place and a digit in the tenths place times a digit in the ones place and a digit in the tenths place. So kind of thinking about how we can create that array model or that area model to solve those. There is a video explaining this one, so check that out if you need a little bit more detail. And you'll notice that this is going to make that connection to that partial products. If your students, when they were multiplying whole numbers, were very successful with partial products and you want to keep that up, then you might want to enforce that more than the area model if that's where they're successful. If they're more successful in the area model, you might want to just delete partial products and you might want to just stay with the area model. Really, whatever works for you. You'll notice it says, use this connection if appropriate for your students. If not, use the models that are working for your kiddos. Use the models that they can visualize and see. You'll see there's another try it out problem set there. Here are the different models that could be created for that specific try it out problem. Once again, use what works for your kiddos. You'll notice there's some practice slides here. If you do not want to use these strategies, please utilize those blank fractions, blank strategy slides, and you can sub out any strategy that's here for a strategy that works for your kids. All right, I know that was a lot of information, and I know that multiplication with decimals can be a little challenging to wrap our brains around. So please, please, please utilize those videos embedded in the essential tasks, and please let us know if you have any questions. Thanks so much for listening.